There you are. Is that better? All right, good, good. All right. Let me just also mention, one of the characteristics often of grief has to do with a period of what we call numbness, a time when just everything seems clouded and confused. So I've met a couple of times with Jeannie, and Bob, as you know, passed away quite suddenly. Although he had been fighting a lot of health issues for a season of time, and at this point in time, I think she just has been overwhelmed with the fact that he looked after most of the paperwork and various other things, and so sorting a lot of those things out has been very numb-minding and difficult and confusing. So at this point in time, there is no plan for a funeral service as such. We did talk, her and I, a bit about a graveside event that they will do for family, and maybe the idea that came, and Jean kind of came up with this for us along the way, is that we'd maybe do a memorial tea or something like that to honor Bob and his memory as a group. And so we'll work on some plans for that, but just to let you know. And also, you received a little handout that I put together on a project for, as I mentioned at one point in time, as I had opportunity to visit and meet with a lot of people here in the church, that I said there's a significant amount of loss, mourning, and grief that people are going through. We've lost a lot of significant individuals, so your mom and Sheila and Bob, and before that, Dawn, and a number of other individuals who are a significant part of this church, but also many of you have had personal loss, husbands and spouses and family members and individuals. So a proposal that I have before you here is Learning to Live with Loss, brief workshop or sessions, 6 of them, or 5 of them rather, in the fall, starting the last part of August through till September, every Tuesday during that period of time. Just a 2-hour time of walking through some of the things that maybe will be of help and benefit in understanding how loss impacts us. And often it is a matter, I've mentioned that numbness, that time when just nothing seems to make sense, the difficulties that are there. Now, you'll notice on here I've got dates down, but I don't have a time. What I'm asking for is a couple of things. One, you may know individuals who are not necessarily a part of this church. They don't have to be. Could be a neighbor or somebody along the way. This might be something that would be timely for them to also be involved in. It is informal. It's a matter of coming together, sharing. I will give some information on each of these, just some background details that help people understand why grief, why mourning, why loss impacts us so desperately sometimes in many ways, and to give some sense of normalcy to the whole process of mourning. And so if that would be of benefit for any of you or for somebody you know, I've got down there my email address if you want to simply send me a quick note and saying I'm interested in this. I don't have a time of the day set aside. I would ideally like to be able to do it, say, on an afternoon, 2 o'clock through till 4 or something like that. However, if evenings are what's going to work best for some, then we can do evenings as well, 7 to 9. But that's why I don't have a specific time set for this, but a way of kind of helping walk through this particular season of life for some of you for whom this might be relevant at this time. So just send me a note or phone me and let me know if that's something that would be of interest, and also if there is a day during the time during the day that might work best, and we'll work forward on that from there. It's always interesting too how things that we get along the way trigger memories from the past. Little things, and every time I get a brownie, I'm reminded of an event from my childhood. It just stands out. I know it's minor and unimportant in a lot of ways, but it sticks in my mind. And you might be inclined to think, if you did before, that I'm a little weird to have this kind of a thought on this. But I remember laying there on the carpet in the living room watching TV, and my sister came in. And she gave me a piece of fudge. Now, you got to understand, my sister and I, we're the picture of sibling rivalry. You know, she's the older one, I'm the next one in line, and she was kind of what we fought constantly, and we, you know, my sworn mortal enemy was my sister, and it seemed like, you know, of course my mom would be gone a lot because she's a single mom, and she'd leave Hazel in charge of things, and she would seemingly in those times, you know, be intolerable on her demands on me. Well, probably not, but it seemed that way anyways, and so we had this kind of an ongoing thing, and then she comes and gives me this piece of fudge. And Mom wasn't home saying, Hazel, go give this to Larry. So I'm wondering as I get it, why is she giving this to me? You know, Mom's not there to tell her to do it or anything like that. And now you gotta understand, too, I have a really overactive imagination in a lot of things, and I had an obsession or a fixation or a thing with death. It seemed like there were all sorts of bizarre and terrible ways in which young kids died in that day. You know, muscular dystrophy, where they had ads on that, and I thought, it must be me. And all those things. I had this obsession with this, and so my mind actually goes to this place of saying, maybe she knows something. Her mom that about me, maybe I'm going to die. She's just going to want to do something nice for me before I die. Well, that's what my thought was. It turned out she was just being kind. And it's kind of funny and sad in a way, isn't it, that we suspect people's motives when they're kind to us. I mean, you know, it's true, isn't it? There's a paranoid nature. Just offer somebody in the store, can I help you carry your groceries? And you watch them as they hold their bags closer, and they're assuming you're going to run away with them, right? They just, you know, no, you can't do that. And try to, you know, it's raining and pouring, you see some poor kid out there underdressed, and he's soaking wet, and you know, I can't stop and offer him a ride as much as I like to. Kindness. And yet that's what the church is about. A church that ministers to the hurting world will always have an audience. And I'm pleased to say that the emphasis and the inception of the Church of the Nazarene was focused in on finding a way to help the needs of a very hurting world at that time and still today. And so you'll find a part of what we do as the Church of the Nazarene is we have compassion centers and ministries and missions that happen all over the time. And probably in September, when we have Grant Zweigel here to talk with us about missions, you might mention about Mission Possible in Vancouver that works with a very desperate area of the city. Your church has also been very receptive and supportive of a lot of compassion work at various levels. Your support of doing a good work for people overseas and across our country and right here in your own town. I've already heard many of the things that you do in support of that. And I want to celebrate you today. And in this series of stories that I have been telling to talk about the wonder of God's love for me, I want to share the story of that very familiar individual we refer to so often as the Good Samaritan. Now, true confession, this message and sermon is based on what I did a number of years ago, and it stands out in remembrance because of an event that took place. It was May, and Audrey and I had traveled to Calgary to be a part of the graduation for Canadian Nazarene College, and it was a great event. We went into the church. Now, it was May. It was in Calgary, so it was snowing, of course. And it had just started on that day, and so we went in for this event, and the graduation was going on, and during that whole time, it just snowed heavier and heavier. In fact, they ended up locking the city down. We didn't get back to Edmonton because of the weather that was there. But at the end of the event and the commencement, we were gathered around in the foyer and visiting the dignitaries and the various other people, and Audrey off in one corner, and the door opened, and the guy came in, and he had snow all over him. And he kind of wove his way through the crowd that was there and came right up to me. And he said, do you have booster cables? And I do, yes. I had cables. And then he asked if I wouldn't mind giving me a boost. He said, I left my car lights on and the battery's dead and I just need some help. So I said, yeah, we're going to do lunch with some people, but I'll go and help you anyways. And we went out and got it started. And when I returned to the church, it was pretty well empty by that time, and Audrey was there alone and waiting for me. And she asked a very logical question. Did you know that guy? I said, no, don't know. Then why, out of all of the people, did he come to you to ask if you got jumper cables? I'd like to think that I have this aura that says I am a righteous, helpful person. The reality is I probably looked like the kind of guy who drove a car that needed booster cables from time to time along the way. But the answer I gave was much simpler. I said to Audrey, I'm working on a message about the Good Samaritan. This is a test to see if I will meet the goal that is here. And with that in mind, let's take a look at what that story, that familiar story says. In Luke chapter 10, verses 25 to 37. Reads this way, and on one occasion, an expert of the law stood and tested Jesus, and he said, Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? What is written in the law, he replied. How do you read it? And he answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. You've answered correctly, Jesus said. Do this and you will live. But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? And in reply, Jesus said, a man was going down to Jerusalem from Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. And they stripped him of his clothes and beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going along down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. And so too a Levite. When he came to the place and saw him, he passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and he saw him, and he took pity on him. And he went to him, and he bandaged his wound, and poured on oil and wine, and then he put the man on his own donkey, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii, and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for the extra expense you may have. Which of the 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? The expert of the law said, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus said, go and do likewise. Now there's 3 attitudes we see showing up here in this particular story that are important. Attitudes we see all around us in this world as well. The first one, the simplest one, what's yours is mine, and I'm going to take it. There's nothing admirable about that particular motto or lifestyle, but it's clearly a motto that is used in our world a great deal today. Every devious scammer who calls you or emails you or offers you some great deal or threatens you with the police coming to arrest you are wanting what you have. Not theirs, but they want yours. To a degree, maybe even sometimes those TV advertisements that make it a great, wonderful problem. Only 6 easy payments and shipping not included, and then you find out the shipping's $89 alone. There are countless examples of all of that schemes that rob us of those things that are valuable to us and leave, in some sense, us on the side. And it's hardly surprising that we have a growing cynicism in our world. Because sadly, the motto, what is yours is mine, and I'm going to take it. I don't need to spend a lot of time on that point. You have your own examples. But the second one was those who passed by, the priest and the Levite. And they have a motto in their attitude, mindset in their attitude, that said, what is mine, and I'm going to keep it. The structure of the Greek is fairly important here. For it makes clear, in the use of the expression, saw him, it carries an emphasis of almost a face-to-face encounter. There's no doubt that they looked into the face of this beaten and helpless individual and responded by passing on the other side. What's mine is mine, and I'm going to keep it. I'll not risk or share it with anybody, even when I see a need or encounter it face to face. There are a lot of these people in our world today as well, aren't there? Now the priest is of a noble family, heir to a religious heritage, a man dedicated to God's service, learned in the law and skilled in God's word. And you can almost understand why he made a wide berth around this particular man on the side of the road. You see, there were 3 things that you had to avoid if you were going to be a priest and you were going to serve the people that came to the temple. in order to keep ritually pure, that was, you had to avoid dead bodies, Gentiles, and Samaritans. And for all they knew, this naked man could be all three of those things. So imagine the inconvenience to him if he stopped to help this man. The Levite was the hard worker of the temple duties. Responsibility was to be diligent, no doubt, a regular participant in all the religious festivals. The Levite would be like the key layman in the church. Board member, respected man of faith. Think of like Wally, if you can. Now he would have been the person most likely to have come alongside the priest to help him in the temple. Perhaps he was on the same path as the priest, and he watched as the priest moved to the side and walked away from him. And it might be that he was influenced by that and said, well, if the priest's not going to do anything, I'm not going to do anything as well. And so he ignores the need. But Luke also does show him at least pausing and having a closer look at this person on the roadside. I don't know if it was just morbid curiosity, or perhaps since this battered man had no clothes and nothing to define who he was or where he is from, maybe he was going to look at him and say, well, what if this man is a good tither? And goes to the temple, maybe we should look after that. But it wouldn't do to pass by somebody like that. If anybody should have reached out and helped this man, it ought to have been these two. And I imagine the beaten man lying there, if he had at least some consciousness, might have breathed a sigh of relief as he saw them coming and say, here's somebody who will help me. But they represent those who simply wear their religion as a robe on the outside and something that never quite soaks in to their inner person. Paul the Apostle would later on remind us of people like that when he would say, if I have the gift of prophecy, if I can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and I have faith that can move mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. And by that he meant you make no difference and affect no lives. What is mine, and I'm going to keep it. Honor, position, prestige are no substitute for love. Goodness is not in the garment you wear or in the name that's attached to you by your religion. The third person we see coming here is the Samaritan. And he models for us a servant attitude that says, what's mine is yours, and I'm going to share it. It's an attitude that is representing in kindness and gentleness the qualities and characteristics of Jesus. It's what we admire most in the people we see who wear the title Christian. So Jordan, Sharon's grandson, noted one of her greatest qualities, he said, was kindness. Now the spark, I should say, for doing this message this day arose from a visit I had with Roy and Rachel over at Coastal Mission House, along with a few of the other staff who were there and who've been a part of this ministry for 30, 40 years. And I asked them at that time to trace for me the mission and the ministry of the story behind this ministry and the securing of a beautiful home and plot of land right on the waterfront. And the story was filled with all of the wonders and miracles of God's intervention to help them come to the place of making this purchase of this place. And woven into this story, of course, were the personal challenges, the sacrifices that had to be made. And I had to believe there were no doubt in that whole long history of this some tough times. But from those who were there, I never heard anybody state an opinion other than an optimism of grace. Here's the application to this particular story of the Good Samaritan. Very soon, the work of Coastal Mission, as you know, will be turned over to another organization. Not just the work, with all the equipment, the assets, the land, the property. It will mean, of course, that for several who have committed their lives almost to this particular ministry, that they will have to move out of the place where they have lived many years and seek and find another place to live. Anna, she was here the last time, shared with me about how she said, God's really supplied for us. They're moving to Nanaimo, to a trailer up there. And again, as they shared this, I didn't hear them share kind of remorse and anger and guilt, but regret only that they didn't have more years to help and to put in to this work that they had given their lives to. Sorrow over leaving familiar settings and hold of a host of memories, but certainly no bitterness, no anger, no remorse in turning this over. What is mine is yours, and I'm going to share it. In the eyes of the bottom line world, that makes no sense. The hard-nosed business person, the cold calculator who operates on the bottom line, operates on that principle, what is mine and I'm going to keep it, would point out that the property and the assets that this group have worked hard to establish is now probably worth, I would suggest, 15 times what it was when they first took it on. Surely the financially assertive would say, well, you deserve some benefits from this. It defies logic, their logic. The world, you see, knows nothing of Christian faith and compassion. Paul said to the Corinthians, where is the wise person? Where is the teacher of the law? Where is the philosopher of the age? Has not God made the foolish things the wisdom of the world? Made foolish the wisdom of the world. And this principle is wrapped up in the form and the actions of the Samaritan. Of all people, for you see, it wasn't just a quaint little story, a fairly little moral attached. For sheer shock value, it would have been difficult to find a more extreme example. We think to ourselves, I guess that might happen, but the people of Jesus' day would have said, no, I don't think it could ever happen that a Samaritan would come and help out somebody else. It would be kind of like saying an American soldier fell among thieves and an Islamic fundamentalist came in and stopped to help him. Compassion, you see, is not just sympathy. Healing the hurts of our world is not just a nice thing that we do if the time is right. In fact, the account of this particular story reminds us that the Samaritan was on a journey. He had a mission to accomplish. He had places to go and things to do. Have you noticed that hurting people and hurting hearts appear at times where we can so often little afford the time? Caring always will interrupt the routines of our life. But it also says he came upon him. Literally, he almost stumbled over him. And you don't have to look very hard and very far to find a need in somebody who's hurting. As I read through this particular account, as I thought about it, I found quickly six steps or specific acts of compassion that Jesus describes coming from this unexpected act of mercy. The first is impact. He let the other person's need have an effect upon him. Caring for the hurting people and persons says when he saw the man, as the others had saw the man, they had excluded him from their life, but he becomes involved in it. And he does something to us. And it's important that we would see the needs in our world. And the passage says, and he felt a deep pity. This doesn't just mean that he felt sorry for the man. In fact, the Greek talks about it, it's like a gut-twisting anxiousness. The way the Greeks had it describing that emotion is the kind of emotion that we find Jesus often seeing. He looked and saw and had compassion upon him. The kind of church that brings healing into this world is the one where people are willing to feel deeply for those in need, to be impacted, to be open to it. The second is to get involved in it. He didn't hesitate to do what had to be done. He didn't simply say to the man, hey, I'm safe over on this side of the road. If you can crawl through the dust to me, I will help you. No, he took the initiative. He went. He knelt down by him. He took the initiative to come to him. And then there's no way that our compassion will ever get done without getting touched and impacted by the mess of another person's world and life. I've been called into enough traumatic situations in hospitals and at roadside accidents and things like that to know that in trauma situations where life is on the thin edge, to me, the real heroes of medicine are the paramedics and the nurses and the doctors who work in these emergency settings and ICUs, who deal with people who are broken and messed up and facing all forms of trauma. And when you watch those people work, you don't see individuals who simply kind of hold people at a safe distance. They come right up close. They blow the breath of life through lips that are foul and unclean, and they cradle bodies that are broken and battered. And there is something unpleasant about a badly beaten body. It has a smell about it, and all the body fluids seem to conspire to this musty kind of an assault on our senses. And they come alongside and they deal with it directly. Caring for hurting people requires risks. And there's no way to help without getting touched and impacted by another person's pain. It's not enough to simply say, call me if you need me. The third action we see here is he gives immediate relief. He did what needed to be done. Now, most commentators will point out that this man was probably a businessman on his journey with valuable goods on the city, and like what you might find in a lot of cases today, he didn't have a first aid kit someplace. So stopping on the road was a dangerous thing, as risky as it was. I mean, he's already evidenced that there's bad people in the area, and would have thought enough to simply have thrown the man across his donkey and hightailed it out of there. But no, what he does first is he gets down and he uses the common things that he had available to him. With wine, he cleans and disinfects the wounds. With oil, he used as a salve in that particular day. It soothes raw and damaged skin, and it is not unlikely that he used maybe some of his own clothes or some of the things that he was going to be selling to be bandages to bind this man up. And he made some of the products he was going to sell, he gave them. Healing hearts and hurting people is not something we put off until it's more convenient. Next, fourthly, I see that he's inconvenienced. We read that he put the man on his own donkey. Compassion caring for others will require we put out and are inconvenienced in a multitude of ways. It will mean to some degree giving up our rights and privileges for the sake of just caring for others. Here's the application. It's easy for us to help somebody out of our prosperity, out of our bounty, out of the excess that we have. Ladies, you'll understand this, that if you're at a meeting and it's getting a little cool out and a man comes to you and says, look, I've got an extra jacket, let me give it to you for you to wear. That's nice, that's kind, thoughtful, compassionate. But if on the other hand he comes and he says, you're looking very cold here, and he takes off his coat and he gives it to you to wear, we call that chivalry, romance, sweet. It's compassion. Next, we see, fifthly, that he is intentional in his actions. He took him to an inn. He wasn't just concerned about the man for the short term. He took him to a place of refuge and safety, and a place where he could regain some strength, and a place where he could kind of bring his life back to some measure of normal again. And don't miss the point that he just didn't unload him on the innkeeper, on somebody else. He took personal care for him. And I love to think of this passage as an image of the local church. Our assignment, you see, is to be involved in finding broken, hurting people, and at the same time making the church the safest place for them to come and find that support. There's a little chorus. You used to sing it a lot back in the day. Probably, Denise, you led it at times. You know, the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run into it. They are saved. A little bit of a pet peeve for me was somebody decided they would agree to have actions for that, So, and the name of the Lord is a strong tower. And the one that bugs me the most is, and the righteous run into it, right? Into it. It's almost kind of like, they run and then you hit this brick wall into it. And there's a lot of people in our world who think that's the church. The last place I'm going to go to get help in time of need is the church, because it just, boom, it'd be like running into a brick wall. But the song, really, what it means, and the text from which it comes, says the Lord is a strong tower. Yeah, it's... And it really is meaning He is a strong tower, and we come into it, and they're saved, and they're safe, and they're cared for. It is a place of refuge. Here's a quote from a writer, Lawrence Crabb, who says, "It's time to build a church, a community of people who take refuge in God and encourage one another to never flee to another source of help. A community of folks who know the only way to live this world is to focus on the spiritual life, our life with God and others. It won't be easy, but it'll be worth it. Our impact on the world is at stake." The sixth thing, the final thing, is investment. The Samaritan was willing to provide for this man's needs for as long as it was going to take. And one commentator said that the money he gave would have been enough and sufficient to carry for this person for 24 days. It's a demonstration of limitless love, unending compassion, a costly thing to determine to care for people with damaged lives. Does it seem somehow extreme? Sometimes it is. It goes beyond the care of what is natural and normal and usual. It is a silent love that the world needs desperately. A world that often just measures things on the bottom line. Makes no sense, really, does it? Unless you remember that who we really do serve. And this is what God's love requires of you. To love your neighbor in a way that is sacrificial and giving beyond measure. Who is your neighbor? Anybody who needs the love of Jesus. Imagine, if you can, that you, what it would have changed to this man if all those that he had hoped for passed him by. The one who showed him greatest mercy was the one he had least expected that would even respond to his need. He would have expected that the Samaritan would have maybe just come over and given a couple of extra kicks along the way because he so despised who he was. What he wasn't expecting was grace and compassion. I mean, I think to myself, could he, after that event, could he ever have looked again at a Samaritan with disdain? Could he laugh at another Samaritan joke told among his buddies? Would he ever join in a time of sitting around with his friends and bashing Samaritans again, knowing what he had experienced? Could he ever again walk by somebody who'd beaten and lying on the side of the road and not be moved? Believe this, your compassion will draw others to faith. A little note of application. In reading the parables of Jesus like this, it's often an interesting exercise to say, so who are you in this particular story? You know, are you like the priest or the Levite or the Good Samaritan or the man lying on the side of the road? And I imagine being the Samaritan and finding this guy beaten on the side of the road and turning him over. And if the face that I saw was the face of one of my children, obviously the actions I take are the same as those described above. I'd have no trouble getting a gut-wrenching impact. This is my kid. I would have no hesitation getting involved and messy, and no matter what, I'd extend whatever investment was needed to help them to be restored. Imagine turning it over and finding an acquaintance, somebody from your church. And even then, without much, you'd still have that response and action and those things, and you'd act in urgency. We could see ourselves responding to their need. I imagine, though, also turning it and finding it somebody who's attempted to bring injury into my life. And that's the true test. Can you extend love to that individual who's driven deep into your heart agonies and troubles and heartbreak? What if the beaten person you turn over has your face? And it might be this morning that somebody here is feeling like, I identify with the guy on the side of the road. Who are you in this story? What is it that you need to do? And who in your world needs the caring love of Christ delivered to them? especially if that need seems to be yours. A writer by the name of Frederick Denker wrote these words: love, not law or social status, determines the choice of neighbor. Divine mercy does not ask the worth of the recipient, only the need. Let me pray. Father, I come before you in a story that is so dramatic in so many different ways and complex, but also real. It understands, Father, the need for us to be a people of deep compassion, but willing to care beyond the measure of this world in ways that does not reflect that world that just simply wants to take or hold, but a spirit of giving. Help us as well, Father, to be a people who would be willing to receive. Philippians reminds us, Paul says, if you have any comfort in his love. We don't have comfort if we don't feel like we deserve it, but let us be a people who will be ready to receive. So I pray for any who might be here this day and feel like they have been through the wars and difficulties and lying on the side of the road. Comfort them, Father. Thank you for bringing them here. Be with us in this service and this time as we celebrate in song, O Father. Reinforce for us again that great tribute of a God who loves us with an everlasting love. And I pray this in your name, in Jesus' name. Amen.